Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. Today we're digging into January 17th, which, according to every historian who has ever looked at a calendar, is apparently the day the universe scheduled all of its plot twists. This date is so overloaded with historical events that if it were a person, it would definitely ask to speak to the manager. So let's take a walk through time, sarcasm in hand, as we unpack geopolitical intrigue, religious drama, scientific discovery, creepy nuclear mishaps, and, because history refuses to relax, Muhammad Ali, Popeye, and Prohibition. January 17th, the day the timeline hit shuffle and forgot to turn it off. Segment 1, Octavian's divorce, papal relocations, and early modern chaos. Let's start in ancient Rome, where January 17th decided to kick things off by ruining someone's marriage. Back in 38 BC, Octavian divorces his wife, Scribonia, on the exact day she gives birth. Yes, nothing says family values like, thanks for the daughter, also pack your things. It's the romantic equivalent of texting, it's over, from across the room. But because this is Rome, this wasn't personal, it was political. Octavian realized his alliance needed an upgrade and swapped partners like he was refreshing his strategic DLC. That's Rome for you. Love is temporary, the empire is forever, and pettiness is a civic virtue. Fast forward to 1377, when Pope Gregory XI brings the papacy back to Rome after nearly 70 years in Avignon. Picture it. The papacy returns home like a teenager after a long semester abroad, hoping Rome cleaned up the house. Spoiler, it absolutely did not. Rome was basically a medieval fixer-upper with street violence. Gregory XI comes home, declares, surprise, we're back, and immediately sparks political turmoil so intense it leads to the Western Schism. Nothing says holy unity like multiple popes arguing over who gets the good office chair. Then we arrive at 1562 for the Edict of Saint-Germain, France's attempt at religious tolerance. The monarchy says, let's allow Protestants to worship, but only a little, and preferably where no one sees them. Imagine telling people they can be free as long as they stay indoors. Naturally, this compromise lasts about 12 minutes before someone decides tolerance is overrated and kicks off the French Wars of Religion. Historically speaking, compromise is when everyone agrees to disagree and then immediately stabs each other. Oh, and in 1362, the North Sea decides it also wants to join the chaos with the St. Marcellus flood. 25,000 people perish, entire coastlines disappear, and the sea basically says, I'm redesigning the region, you're welcome. Climate change didn't invent weather chaos. January 17th did. Segment 2. Ice, exploration, triumph, and failure. January 17th is also the day explorers collectively realize that Earth is trying to kill them. Let's start with 1773, when Captain James Cook becomes the first human to cross the Antarctic Circle. Cook looks at the pack ice, the cold, the lack of anything resembling comfort, and says, yeah, let's keep going. He navigates a ship into a frozen wasteland with the confidence of a guy who absolutely did not read the Yelp reviews. Then we jump to 1912, when Robert Falcon Scott reaches the South Pole, only to discover that Roald Amundsen beat him there. Imagine traveling 800 miles through frozen hell, frostbitten and exhausted, only to find a Norwegian flag already planted with a smug little note. Scott writes in his diary, "Great God, this is an awful place," which is polar explorer speak for, I hate it here and I hate everyone. The tragedy is that Scott's team pushes on anyway, even as their bodies start filing formal HR complaints against them. It's the ultimate example of British perseverance. Even when everything is bleak, morale is low, and the universe is screaming, go home, they insist on dying with dignity while writing beautiful journal entries. Then, to round out Antarctica's January 17th collection, we get Colonel J.K. Bajaj in 1989, the first Indian explorer to reach the pole. Little known fact, it turns out Antarctica isn't just British and Norwegian grief therapy. Nations around the world now join in the fun, which in polar terms means frostbite and bragging rights. Segment 3. empires, overthrows, and the shape of American expansion. January 17th is also the day American imperialism looked at the Pacific and Caribbean and said, I want that. In 1893, businessmen in Hawaii overthrow Queen Liliuokalani. Their reason? We want money and also democracy, but only for us. The Queen, being far more dignified than any of the men staging a coup in her palace courtyard, writes a formal protest, saying she yields under force but expects the U.S. to fix this mess. The U.S. reads her letter, says, yeah, we'll definitely look into it, and then annexes Hawaii anyway. It's the diplomatic equivalent of saying, we hear your concerns while unplugging the mic. Jump to 1917. The U.S. buys the Virgin Islands from Denmark for $25 million in gold. America essentially walks into a geopolitical garage sale, sees 3 beautiful pieces of warm weather real estate and says, I'll take them. Do you accept gold? The strategic goal was preventing German U-boats from building a Caribbean summer home. Even in 1917, America was thinking ahead to submarine Airbnb. And in 1899, the U.S. annexes Wake Island, which over the next century becomes a cable hub, a refueling post, and the setting for several future History Channel documentaries titled Wake Island, the rock you forgot, but the military really didn't. Segment 4, global warfare, broken arrows, and the Midwest's worst wake-up calls. January 17th, during the 20th century, is basically a highlight reel of humanity's worst impulses. In World War I, the Ottomans attempt a winter assault in the mountains of Sarikamish. It goes terribly because, shockingly, marching an army into minus 30-degree blizzards wearing the 1915 version of winter wear doesn't end well. It's like they built their strategy out of wishful thinking and scarves. In World War II, January 17th gives us the Franco-Thai naval battle at Ko Chang, the start of the Monte Cassino campaign, and the liberation of Warsaw. History really went for the triple feature here. Cassino becomes one of the bloodiest campaigns in Italy. Warsaw is liberated only after being almost entirely destroyed. And Ko Chang proves that even colonial navies can have a dramatic cameo. By 1946, the world tries diplomacy instead of war and launches the first ever UN Security Council session. Nations gather and say, let's prevent global conflict, and then spend the next 80 years sitting around a circular table arguing about who should speak next. But the fireworks continue in 1991 with Operation Desert Storm. America unveils GPS-guided warfare, stealth jets, and Tomahawk missiles, essentially showing the world, here is the future, and it has a laser pointer. Baghdad wakes up in the middle of a revolution in military technology and says, what is that sound? The answer? The 1990s. Then there's 1966 and the Palomares incident, where the U.S. accidentally drops hydrogen bombs on Spain. 2 explode, non-nuclear thankfully, 1 lands intact, and 1 decides to go scuba diving in the Mediterranean. The U.S. then spends months searching for the missing nuke like it's the world's worst Easter egg hunt. Segment 5, Cold War duality, Eisenhower's warning, and Lumumba's tragedy. January 17, 1961, is the moment the Cold War looked at irony and said, let's make history uncomfortable. On this day, Eisenhower gives his farewell address, warning Americans about the military-industrial complex, which he describes as a giant octopus of defense spending slowly wrapping its tentacles around democracy. He also warns that scientific research might become too tied to government money, which in 2026 feels hilariously quaint. On that same day in the Congo, Patrice Lumumba, the nation's first democratically elected leader, is executed after a coup backed, facilitated, or quietly applauded by several Western powers. So while Eisenhower warns that power can corrupt democracy, democracy is literally being dismantled in Central Africa. January 17th, the day the Cold War said, do as I say, not as I do. Segment 6, earthquakes that redefined engineering. January 17th also gives us earthquakes, big ones. In 1994, Northridge hits Los Angeles at 4:31 a.m., startling millions of Californians who had previously believed they were immune to natural consequences. Freeways collapse, buildings fracture, and the city learns that its steel frames were not actually as strong as everyone confidently told themselves. Engineers rewrite building codes while muttering, well, oops. Then in 1995, exactly 1 year later, Kobe, Japan is rocked by a magnitude 6.9 quake that topples expressways, ignites fires, and forces a national reckoning about seismic safety. The Japanese government looks at its building standards and says, we're going to need a bigger book. Engineers fix everything until the next big quake, because that's how humanity learns, slowly and expensively. Segment 7, birthdays, crime sprees, and pop culture icons. Finally, January 17th brings out the celebrities. Benjamin Franklin, inventor of bifocals and the original life hack influencer. Muhammad Ali, who changed sports and civil rights. Betty White, America's eternal grandmother. And Popeye, the spinach salesman who moonlighted as a cartoon sailor. We also get the Great Brinks robbery of 1950, when a group of thieves dresses like haunted chauffeurs and steals millions from an armored depot. The FBI spends 6 years trying to solve it, which means the thieves enjoyed almost as much suspense as we do on Netflix. And in 1920, Prohibition kicks in. America outlaws alcohol, promptly invents organized crime, and eventually decides, you know what, maybe bars weren't the problem here. In conclusion, January 17th is not a day. It's a historical buffet. It gives us empires rising and falling, explorers freezing and succeeding, queens overthrown, presidents warning us, generals bombing us, scientists navigating by stars and satellites, and earthquakes reminding us that gravity is undefeated. It's a date that insists on being the center of attention. If history were a reality show, January 17th would absolutely be the season finale, full of drama, betrayal, disaster, and Benjamin Franklin giving moral advice no one asked for.